Good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming. I'm really happy to be here. I would like to thank Jay, of course, and the department, and Chloe, and I'm sure there are other people who did invisible work and made this happen. Thank all of you. I think it might be in a somewhat peculiar position on this panel because the job into which I transitioned from my academic track, from being a graduate student for 8 years and then early career tenure track faculty at the research university, is actually not unrelated to what I was trained to do. So the job I got at the Holocaust Museum had a lot to do with what I was trained to do academically. During the years of my PhD training here at Michigan, I was trained as a historian of Jewish history and East European history. And after a very brief stint of teaching in a tenure track position at the University of South Carolina, I transitioned to a position at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. So yes, the new position was in a museum, in an institution that is public-facing, that aims to reach audiences that are not academic, and they're quite different, actually, from who I was taught to try to reach as a historian. And also an institution in which most people who were working there are not academics. So that was refreshing, I have to say. On the other hand, my job title was at the time and still is applied research scholar, which sounds awful. But much of the job description actually mentions and mandates work, publishing in peer-reviewed journals. I work in a center whose main goal is to make sure that Holocaust scholarship is vibrant at the academic level. So we're very involved in academic edifice that we try to define as Holocaust studies. And so I work with faculty and with researchers all the time. So I was both outside of academia and also very firmly in. I had feet in both, whatever the idiom is. And at this point, I wish I could tell you that this was all planned or that I thought it through, but the truth is, it was not. I would be lying. And there are several people here who said, Tracy and also Jamie, that I really don't know how this happened. It was a journey. In truth, I decided to leave my tenure track position because I was not happy with the job. So I was not an unemployed historian. I did everything by the book. I trained myself to be a historian. I took advantage of amazing workshops that we had here, which we were workshopping job letters, we were doing mock interviews. I did well in my interview circuit. I got a tenure track job, and then when I went there, I realized that I was really not happy there, and that it might have been a mistake, personally. And it was a great job. It was a position at a flagship state university. It was, two teaching load, substantial research funding. It was supposed to be your dream come true, but it wasn't. And I knew I had to leave. And so this is kind of the first point that I want to make today, is that we talk about career diversity because of structural problems in academia, the hyperproduction of PhDs, and the problem of precarious work. And that's very necessary, and of course this is the conversation we should be having. But in my case, and I know, I'm well aware of my positionality and the privilege and that it might not be same or universal for other people. But I wish, in my case, there was more openness while I was in graduate school for conversations about work-life balance, for doubts about an academic career, and in general for the kinds of conversations that we're having here at this conference. I was having this tortured internal, in retrospect, that I can see now, that I was having this internal conversation with myself about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be, and it just seemed there was this one thing, and that's what I needed to do. And I felt I couldn't voice these doubts openly in this department, not to my advisors, not to my peers, as it was, or at least I perceived it to be a taboo. I'm very happy that Jamie could tell her advisor that she didn't want to turn into him. And I was amused at Jay's example where you said that your student said, I really am not interested in this track. That's not what my life here was. It was supposed to be, you're either a tenure track and usually a tenure track position at the research university, or it's some kind of, bigger or smaller failure, but it's not the real deal. And even to this day, we're having conversations about career diversity as are framed as this is the conversation about Plan B. And of course, in my case, it certainly was a Plan B, because as I said, I didn't plan any of this. But there is no reason why it should be a Plan B. And of course, we all know Jim's article from almost a decade ago that we should remove this taboo. It should not, it's a legitimate concern, and you should be thinking this not as A and B, but as a whole. So I was extremely lucky, I should say, to have gotten that position at the Holocaust Museum, but I did it because I was able to use all the traditional academic stuff. I got it because I could sell myself as a Holocaust historian, seriously. And the whole process was really not a result of my deep thinking about non-academic jobs, about what transferable skills I have, and all these steps that are necessary as you consider your career options. In all honesty, I was quite ill prepared for this transition, and as started my job, I didn't think of it as a transition at all. I just simply thought, I'm going to a research institute, I'm going to be an academic who does not teach. And sometimes it's like that, but sometimes it's not like that. Now, this is not to say that I did not have transferable skills, I just didn't know how to think of them. The job was very different from a university setting. Museums are obviously different professional environments, but it did take some effort to figure out how this particular institution works. It's a rather sizable museum. We have around 700 people working there. How it functions, what the organizational structure is, where the power is, who is calling the shots, how my work aligns or does not align with the mission and the priorities of the museum, and so on. It was agonizing at the beginning to have to talk and work jointly on projects with people who are not academics. I didn't know how to do that. I was not trained to do that, but it was also very refreshing, and today I know it's very important too. It took some time to understand that the academic mode of doing history is not the only one. It took a very long time to realize that, and there are other ways and modes modes of being a historian, which are not academic, which are different, but they're not in any way inferior to this task. So I was, I realized soon after being involved in this long-term publishing project where we published sources on the Holocaust as part of this museum series, that the books we were publishing were not really finding their audiences. This went back to the way the project was conceived, which was before I came on board. I realized this is when it became obvious that I was in a different world. They were conceptualized by people who had never set foot in a classroom, who thought what they were designing was necessary and needed, but was not. And they were too expensive and kind of were addressing both researchers and students and teachers, and it just didn't work. So I tried to imagine with my colleague at work who is a fellow PhD but in comparative literature, what this project would look like if we were to serve one particular audience. And so we tried to, and that was the best part of this effort, and the kind of when I started thinking of my work as a set of skills that I could articulate and that I could actually know that I'm not just an academic historian, that I could do all these other things. So we just thought, what would it take to bring this to people? And so the internet, right? We were going to do something on the internet, but we didn't know what that was. And we started this long process of trial and error where we talked to 2 years of talking to researchers, college students, instructors about their needs, surveying the ways in which primary sources are used in college classrooms, looking at the landscape of digital source-based history projects, testing the various open source digital platforms, convincing the leadership of the center that to take this leap of faith and to give us the time to do all that. And so we created this digital mock-up of a website that would make translated, annotated, and contextualized primary sources digitally available for teaching at the college level in North America. We then tested a prototype, convinced the museum that it would fly, got resources from the museum. We had none. We had the two of us sitting in an office and kind of brainstorming. Got a team of people whose jobs I had never heard before, user experience designers, front end and back end designers, and all these kinds of things. And so we built a website from scratch, and then we worked with the development team to raise a lot of money for this. We released the beta version, and then finally we released the website 3 years ago, almost to this day. It was in November 2016. It's called Experiencing History, and as of today, it's being used in about 1,000 college classrooms in the United States and reaching tens of thousands of students. So again, I learned how to articulate the sets that I had, but I was never able to recognize while I was here. Working on this project, I realized that I identified the causes of a problem, I defined the scope of the problem, I took initiative and developed what turned out to be a large collaborative project. I navigated the Byzantine nexus of museum practices and policies and bureaucratic bottlenecks. I managed the project, I managed conflict, as somebody pointed out yesterday. I wrote at all levels, from project and funding proposals to sitting down with lawyers and arguing about every word in a letter to archives and museums abroad of how we can use their materials online and there were all debates about indefinite and definite articles. So, which as a Slavic language speaker, I'm not very proficient. And so, I was very happy then to be able to pair up with this department in particular to work on, I'm sure most of you know by now, is the HistoryLab, a graduate class where we had about a dozen students produce content for our website. My colleague Leah and I, the co-authors of this Experiencing History website, were always, because it was growing, we needed people to write for us. And we knew that graduate students are on the cutting edge of ideas and scholarship and kind of creativity, and we needed to tap into this, but we also didn't want to, just throw onto graduate students another thing they need to do when on the margins and when they don't have time, and that it's invisible work. So we try to find people who could do that, who are graduate students, whose advisors might be amenable to maybe giving them some kind of release, whether in terms of teaching or a seminar paper. And we were very lucky to find one person who's at the University of New York, whose advisor allowed her to spend a semester writing for our website, and that would be integrated into her professional progress in her department towards her PhD degree. And so when we approached the University of Michigan, because I thought, okay, Jeff Feidlinger, who is not here today, is a member of our academic committee at the museum. And so I approached him and thought maybe he has some graduate students who could do the same thing for us. And I knew that Michigan was one of the departments. I didn't know, but I was kind of supposing maybe that this department would be open toward that kind of thing. And then Jeff, I guess, talked to Rita and more broadly of the department, and this wonderful course happened in the last winter semester. And so, how am I doing with time? Okay, so. In conclusion, I should say some practical things. I think my problem, and again, this might not be universal, obviously, but you're getting the skills. It's not whether you should, write a blog or do something extraordinary. Yes, that is amazing, and we heard yesterday about a very interesting and powerful example of this. But I think it's the bigger change is to try to think about what you're already doing and how this can be framed to be more relevant for other kinds of contexts. And not only what you do here in this program, but also what you did before and what you did as you were enrolled here and as you were progressing towards your degree that you might think as a non-academic or somehow not relevant to your main work. So I would say try to rethink this as intellectual labor and not just administrative experience or something that could check a box in your application letter. It's almost anything you do will mobilize the skills that you that have brought you here where you are today. And I think that it's the most important change is to try to think about what these are. And I think I'm out of time. Thank you. And I'll be